The coffee shop was packed when Clara Anderson's credit card declined for the third time, and she felt the heat of 40 strangers' impatient stares burning into her back as she fumbled through her wallet for cash she knew wasn't there. "I'm so sorry," she said to the barista, her voice tight with embarrassment. "Let me just check my other card." "Don't pay for that," a deep voice said from behind her, and she turned to see a man in an impeccably tailored navy suit extending his black credit card toward the barista. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and gray eyes that seemed genuinely kind despite the expensive watch on his wrist. Clara felt her spine straighten automatically. "No, thank you, I've got it." The man didn't lower his card. "Really, it's no trouble at all." "I appreciate the offer, but no." Clara finally found a crumpled $20 bill in the bottom of her purse and handed it to the barista with a relieved smile. "See, all good." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, sliding his card back into his wallet. Something flickered in his expression that Clara couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or surprise. Most people didn't refuse money from strangers who looked like they had plenty to spare. "Fair enough," he said, and his lips curved into a small smile. "I admire that." Clara collected her change and her simple black coffee, acutely aware that the man was still watching her. She managed a polite nod before weaving through the crowd toward the door, her face still warm from the whole mortifying experience. The December air hit her like a slap, and she pulled her thin coat tighter around her body as she hurried down the Chicago sidewalk. Her phone buzzed with another notification from her bank about insufficient funds, and she silenced it without looking. She knew exactly how bad things were. She didn't need a digital reminder every 5 minutes. 3 months ago, she'd been on track to finish her master's degree in social work with a decent amount of savings and a part-time job at a nonprofit that promised full-time hours after graduation. Then her mom got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick that ate through savings accounts and forced impossible choices between medication and rent. Clara had moved home to help, deferred her last semester, and watched her carefully constructed future crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. Now her mom was in remission, thank God, but Clara was 26 years old, living in her childhood bedroom and barely scraping by with whatever freelance grant writing work she could find. The coffee had been a small luxury she'd promised herself after submitting a particularly brutal application. Clearly, the universe had other ideas about whether she deserved small luxuries. She didn't think about the man from the coffee shop again, until 3 days later, when she walked into her first day at her new temporary job. The Bradford Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and the kind of minimalist design that screamed money. Clara had gotten the position through a connection from her old nonprofit job, a 6-month contract as a grant coordinator. The pay was significantly better than anything she'd managed to cobble together lately, and she'd actually been able to sleep the night before without her stomach churning with anxiety about bills. The HR coordinator, an efficient woman named Patricia, led Clara through a maze of modern offices and conference rooms. "You'll be working primarily with our Director of Community Initiatives, but Mr. York likes to be involved in all aspects of the Foundation's work. He's very hands-on." "Mr. York?" Clara asked, trying to keep up in the heels she'd borrowed from her younger sister. "Xavier York. He founded the Bradford Foundation 5 years ago. Brilliant man, very dedicated to the mission." Patricia glanced at her with a knowing smile. "He's also single, handsome, and worth about $300 million, so expect some competition from the other women in the office." Clara laughed. "I'm here to work, not husband hunt." "That's what they all say." Patricia said cheerfully, then stopped in front of a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "And here's where you'll be spending most of your time." Clara walked in and froze. Xavier York stood behind the massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, gray eyes focused on the Chicago skyline. He was dressed more casually than he'd been at the coffee shop, dark jeans and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, but there was no mistaking him. He turned, saw her, and something flickered across his face. Surprise first, then what might have been amusement. "I'll call you back, David," he said into the phone, then set it down. "Clara Anderson, you two know each other?" Patricia asked, looking between them with obvious curiosity. "We've met," Xavier said, his voice neutral. "Briefly." Clara felt her professional composure clicking into place like armor. "Very briefly. Mr. York offered to buy my coffee. I declined." "And you told me no," Xavier said, and now he was definitely smiling. "And you meant it." "I did." Patricia looked utterly confused. "Well, I'll leave you two to get acquainted. Clara, Xavier will walk you through your initial responsibilities. Your direct supervisor, Monica, is out this week, so you'll be reporting to him in the interim." The door closed behind Patricia with a soft click, and Clara and Xavier stood there looking at each other across the expensive office. "Small world," Xavier said finally. "Apparently." Clara clutched her portfolio a little tighter. "I didn't realize you were the founder of the Bradford Foundation when I applied for this job. Would it have changed anything if you had? No, I need the work and I'm good at what I do." That smile again, subtle but warm. "I don't doubt it." "Your references were exceptional, and your grant writing portfolio is impressive. The application you wrote for the Morrison Family Foundation was particularly well crafted." Clara relaxed slightly. This she could handle. Talking about work was infinitely easier than navigating whatever strange tension was humming in the air between them. "Thank you. I believe in the power of storytelling in grant applications. Numbers matter, but you need to make the funders care about the people behind those numbers." "Exactly." Xavier gestured to the conference table by the windows. "Have a seat. Let me walk you through what we're working on." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of project details and foundation priorities. Xavier was articulate and passionate about the work, particularly the foundation's focus on supporting families affected by medical crises. He'd lost his younger brother to leukemia when Xavier was 19, he explained, and the experience had shaped everything about how he wanted to use his wealth. "I built a software company," he said, pulling up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "Made more money than any one person could reasonably spend in a lifetime. This felt like the only thing worth doing with it." Clara found herself leaning forward, genuinely engaged. "How did you make the transition from tech to philanthropy?" "Sold the company 5 years ago. I was 31 and exhausted and tired of writing code that helped other rich people get richer. My brother Tyler used to say that money was only worth something if you could use it to make people's lives better." Xavier's expression softened. "He was 14 when he died. Smartest, kindest person I've ever known." "I'm sorry," Clara said quietly. "Thank you." Xavier closed the laptop and looked at her directly. "Which brings me to why Monica specifically wanted you on this team. Your background with medical family advocacy and your personal experience." Clara stiffened. "My personal experience?" "Your reference from the Brennan Center mentioned that you took time off to care for a sick parent. I'm not trying to pry into your private life, but that kind of first-hand understanding is valuable in this work." "My mom had breast cancer," Clara said carefully. "She's in remission now." "I'm glad to hear that." Xavier's voice was genuine. "And I want to be clear, I'm not asking you to use your personal pain for the foundation's benefit, but if you're comfortable sharing insights from that experience, It would help us design better programs. Clara nodded slowly. There was something disarming about his directness, the way he acknowledged the potential awkwardness without dancing around it. I can do that. They worked until almost 6, and by the time Clara gathered her things to leave, her head was spinning with information and her stomach was rumbling. She'd been too nervous to eat much lunch, and now she was paying for it. As if on cue, her stomach growled audibly. Xavier glanced up from his desk. "Did you eat today?" "I had a granola bar." He checked his watch. "There's a good Italian place 2 blocks from here. Let me buy you dinner. We can discuss the Morrison application strategy." Every alarm bell in Clara's head started ringing. "That's not necessary. It's 6:15 on your first day and I've kept you late going through files. The least I can do is feed you. I appreciate it, but I'm fine." Xavier stood, walking around the desk to lean against it, arms crossed. He was close enough now that Clara could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "You turned down coffee from a stranger. This is your boss offering a working dinner to go over foundation business." "It's different, is it?" "I think so." He tilted his head, studying her. "But if you're uncomfortable, I'll respect that. I can email you the notes instead." Clara hesitated. She was hungry and she did need to understand the Morrison project better. More than that, something about Xavier made her want to say yes, which was exactly why she should say no. Rich, handsome men who respected boundaries were dangerous in their own way. "Just dinner?" she asked. "And we're talking about work." "Just dinner. All work." Xavier grabbed his jacket from the coat rack. "Cross my heart." The restaurant was warm and smelled like garlic and fresh bread. They sat at a small table near the back, and Xavier immediately ordered an appetizer sampler without asking if Clara wanted to share. She should have been annoyed by the presumption, but she was too hungry to care. "So," Xavier said once they had glasses of wine in front of them, "tell me what you think about the Foundation's approach to medical family support." They talked about program design and grant strategies while demolishing the appetizers. Xavier listened more than he spoke, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes on his phone. Clara found herself relaxing into the conversation, her initial wariness fading as they debated the merits of different funding models. "You're not what I expected," she admitted halfway through her pasta. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. More arrogance, maybe. Most wealthy philanthropists I've encountered treat charity work like a hobby, something to make themselves feel good without actually getting their hands dirty." Xavier's laugh was low and genuine. "I've met plenty of those too. They write big checks for galas and want their names on buildings, but they couldn't tell you the actual impact of their donations." "Exactly." Clara gestured with her fork. "You actually understand the work. That's rare." "My brother's medical bills nearly bankrupted my family," Xavier said quietly. "My parents had good insurance, but it didn't cover everything. We had to fundraise for his treatment. I watched my mom choose between paying for his medication and buying groceries." He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. "That kind of desperation stays with you. So no, this isn't a hobby. This is personal." Clara set down her fork, something shifting in her chest. "I get that. When my mom got sick, I had to decide between finishing my degree and being there for her. Between paying my rent and covering the Cape's insurance wouldn't touch. You make choices you never thought you'd have to make." "What did you choose?" "Her. Always her." Clara took a sip of wine. "I can finish my degree later. She needed me then." Xavier looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "That's exactly the kind of person I want working at the Foundation. Someone who understands that we're not just moving money around. We're supporting real people through the worst moments of their lives." The conversation shifted after that, becoming less about work and more personal. Xavier told her about growing up in Wisconsin, about building his first computer at 12, and starting his software company at 23. Clara shared stories about her chaotic childhood with 3 siblings, about her determination to become a social worker, despite everyone telling her she'd never make enough money. "My dad still doesn't understand why I didn't go into finance," she said with a rueful smile. "He thinks I'm wasting my potential." "Are you?" "No," Clara's voice was firm. "Money isn't everything. Impact matters more." Xavier raised his glass. "I'll drink to that." They lingered over dessert, the restaurant gradually emptying around them. Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed a meal this much, or felt this comfortable talking to someone she'd just met. Xavier was easy to talk to, funny and self-deprecating despite his wealth and success. When they finally left, the temperature had dropped significantly. Clara shivered in her thin coat, and Xavier immediately shrugged off his jacket. "Here," he said, holding it out. "I'm fine, Clara." His voice was patient but firm. "You're clearly cold. Take the jacket." "I said I'm fine." Xavier draped the jacket over her shoulders anyway before she could protest further. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like expensive cologne. "You can give it back tomorrow. I'm not going to let you freeze to make a point about independence." Clara wanted to argue, but her teeth were starting to chatter. "Fine, but only because it makes practical sense." "Of course," Xavier said, and she could hear the amusement in his voice. "Purely practical." He insisted on putting her in an Uber despite her protests. And as the car pulled away from the curb, Clara looked back to see him standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. This was dangerous, she thought. Xavier York was her boss, a millionaire, completely out of her league in every possible way. And worse, he was kind and genuine and looked at her like she mattered. She couldn't afford to develop feelings for him. She needed this job too much to risk it on something as foolish as attraction. But when she got home and hung his jacket in her closet, breathing in the scent of it one more time, she knew she was already in trouble. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of work and increasingly complicated feelings. Clara threw herself into foundation projects, writing grants and coordinating with partner organizations. She was good at her job, and Xavier made sure she knew it, praising her work in staff meetings and forwarding complimentary emails from funders. But it was more than just professional respect. There were the small moments that made her pulse quicken. Xavier bringing her coffee in the morning, remembering exactly how she liked it. His hand on the small of her back as they navigated through a crowded event. The way he sought her opinion on everything, treating her insights as valuable as those from people with decades more experience. They fell into a pattern of working late together, ordering dinner to the office and talking until the cleaning crew arrived. They discussed everything: foundation business, books, politics, their families. Clara learned that Xavier still missed his brother every day, that he was close with his parents and called them every Sunday, that he dated casually over the years, but never found anyone who understood why the foundation work mattered so much to him. "Most women I've gone out with are more interested in the lifestyle than the person," he admitted one evening, spinning his pen between his fingers. "Private planes and yacht parties and all that surface-level nonsense." "That sounds exhausting," Clara said. "It is." Xavier looked at her across the desk. "You're different. Because I'm not impressed by money. Because you value the right things. Because you told me no when I tried to buy you coffee, even though you clearly needed someone to do something nice for you." His voice softened. "Because you chose your mother over your own ambitions without a second thought." Clara's throat tightened. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have. And that's my point." The tension between them was becoming harder to ignore. Clara caught Monica, who'd returned from her leave, watching them with knowing eyes. Patricia from HR made pointed comments about how much time Clara spent in Xavier's office. Even the other grant coordinators started treating her differently, with a mix of envy and resentment. "People are talking," her coworker Jennifer said one afternoon, cornering Clara by the coffee maker, "about you and Xavier." Clara felt her defenses rise. "We're working on a major grant proposal. Of course we spend time together." "Right, working." Jennifer's tone made it clear she didn't believe that for a second. "Just be careful. Office romances never end well, especially when there's that kind of power imbalance." "There's no romance," Clara said firmly. "We're colleagues." But that night, working late again, Xavier's hand brushed hers reaching for the same document, and the jolt of electricity that ran through her body made a liar out of her. "Sorry," Xavier said, but he didn't move his hand away. His fingers were warm, slightly calloused despite his years away from manual work. Clara should have pulled back. Instead, she found herself looking up at him, at the way the desk lamp cast shadows across his face, at the intensity in his gray eyes. "Clara," he said quietly, "don't." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Please don't." "Don't what?" "Whatever you're about to say. Whatever this is." She finally pulled her hand back, standing up and walking to the windows. The city stretched out below them, a million lights against the darkness. "You're my boss. I need this job. I can't afford to complicate things." She heard Xavier stand, heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, but he stopped a few feet behind her, close enough to feel his presence, far enough to maintain respectful distance. "You're right," he said. "And I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable. That was never my intention." "You haven't made me uncomfortable." Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "That's the problem." The silence stretched between them, loaded with everything they weren't saying. "What do you want me to do?" Xavier asked finally. "I can reassign you to work directly with Monica if you prefer. I can keep things purely professional. Just tell me what you need." Clara turned to face him. "What do you want?" "That's not fair." "Why not?" "Because you're right about the power dynamic. Because you're concerned about your job security, and I would never want you to feel pressured." Xavier ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "What I want is irrelevant if it makes your life more complicated." "That's not an answer." "Fine." Xavier closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that Clara could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I want to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not a working meal. I want to know everything about you. What you read, what you dream about, what makes you laugh." His voice dropped lower. "I want to kiss you, Clara. I've wanted to kiss you since you told me no in that coffee shop, and every day since has only made it worse." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "I can't lose this job." "You won't. Regardless of what happens between us personally, your position here is secure. I'll put it in writing if you need me to." Xavier's hand came up like he might touch her face, then fell back to his side. "But I understand if you can't trust that. I understand if this is too messy or too risky. Just say the word and I'll back off completely." Clara knew what the smart choice was. Keep things professional, maintain boundaries, protect herself and her career. She'd been taking care of everyone else her whole life, making the responsible choice, doing the right thing. Just once she wanted to do the selfish thing. "Ask me," she whispered. Xavier's eyes searched her face. "Ask you what?" "Ask me to dinner. A real dinner." The smile that broke across his face was worth every risk. "Clara Anderson, would you have dinner with me this Saturday? Somewhere nice, somewhere that has nothing to do with the foundation or grant proposals or professional obligations." "Yes." Xavier did touch her face then, his palm warm against her cheek. "Thank you. For what? For giving me a chance, for trusting me." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "For being exactly who you are." Clara leaned into his touch, letting herself have this moment of weakness. "I'm terrified." "Me too. Really, really." Xavier's laugh was soft. "I haven't been this nervous about a date since I was 16 and asked Emily Morrison to junior prom. Did she say yes? She did. Then she dumped me 3 weeks later for a senior with a car." Xavier's expression turned serious again. "I don't have a great track record with relationships, Clara. I'm telling you that up front. I work too much. I'm not good at sharing my feelings, and apparently I'm impossible to live with." "Who told you that?" "My last girlfriend. Right before she moved out and started dating my former business partner." Clara winced. "Ouch." "Yeah. So if you want to change your mind about Saturday, I'd understand." "You want me to change my mind?" "God, no," Clara smiled. "Then I'll see you Saturday." They stood there for another moment, the air thick with possibility, before Xavier finally stepped back. "I should let you go home. It's almost 9. Probably wise." Neither of them moved. "Clara?" "Yeah." "This is me respecting boundaries and not kissing you in the office where anyone could walk in." Heat flooded through her body. "Noted. Just so we're clear. Very clear." Xavier's smile was slow and devastating. "Good." Saturday arrived with Chicago's typical February weather. Cold and gray with the threat of snow. Clara spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out what to wear, cycling through every dress in her limited wardrobe, before settling on a simple black number she'd bought for her college graduation. Her sister Megan sprawled across Clara's bed, offering unsolicited commentary. "You're going on a date with a millionaire and you're wearing that. What's wrong with it?" "Nothing, if you're going to a funeral." Megan hopped up and dove into Clara's closet. "Let me see what I can work with here." 20 minutes later, Clara stood in front of the mirror wearing one of Megan's dresses, a deep emerald green that did incredible things for her eyes. Her sister had also insisted on doing her makeup and hair, and Clara barely recognized herself. "You clean up nice," Megan said with satisfaction. "He's going to lose his mind. It's just dinner. With your millionaire boss who's apparently been pining over you for weeks." "Clara, this is straight out of a romance novel. It's not that dramatic." "Sure it's not." Megan handed Clara a small clutch purse. "Just promise me you'll actually have fun tonight. You've been stressed for so long. You deserve something good." Clara hugged her sister impulsively. "Thank you. That's what baby sisters are for. Now go, your Prince Charming is probably waiting." Xavier had texted that he'd pick her up at 7. Clara had tried to argue that she could meet him at the restaurant, but he'd been insistent, and she'd eventually given in. When the doorbell rang at 6:55, her stomach did a nervous flip. Her mom got to the door first. Linda Anderson had been waiting in the living room with the kind of excited energy usually reserved for Christmas morning. "You must be Xavier," Clara heard her mother say as she descended the stairs. "Clara's told me absolutely nothing about you, which means you're important." "Mom," Clara groaned, reaching the bottom of the stairs. Then she saw Xavier and forgot how to breathe. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, his dark hair styled perfectly. And when his eyes landed on her, the expression on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You look stunning," he said softly. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Her mom was watching this exchange with barely contained glee. "I'm Linda," Clara's mother, "and you're the man who runs that foundation where she works." "Yes, madam." Xavier shook her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Clara speaks very highly of you. I'm sure she's mentioned how sick I was and how she had to put her life on hold to take care of me." Linda's voice held a note of guilt that Clara knew well. She mentioned it, Xavier said gently. What she told me was that she got to spend time with someone she loves during a difficult period. She didn't frame it as a sacrifice. Linda's eyes got misty. You're a keeper. Clara, don't mess this up. Oh my God, Mom. Xavier laughed, warm and genuine. I promised to have her home at a reasonable hour. You're both adults. Keep her out as late as you want. Linda squeezed Clara's hand. Have fun, honey. The car waiting outside was sleek and black with a driver who nodded politely as Xavier helped Clara into the back seat. She tried not to gawk at the leather interior and the bottle of champagne chilling in the center console. This is a bit much, she said as Xavier slid in beside her. I wanted tonight to be special. It didn't need to be expensive to be special. Xavier smiled. There's that independence again. Does it help if I tell you I got a good deal on the car service? Did you? No, but I could lie if it makes you feel better. Clara laughed despite herself. You're impossible. I've been told that before. The restaurant was in the Gold Coast, the kind of place with a months-long waiting list and a dress code. The host greeted Xavier by name and led them to a private corner table with a view of the city. Clara tried not to feel intimidated by the three forks at her place setting. Relax, Xavier said, reaching across the table to take her hand. It's just dinner. Just dinner in a restaurant where the napkins probably cost more than my rent. The napkins are actually reasonably priced. It's the silverware that's expensive. Clara snorted, then covered her mouth, embarrassed. Xavier's grin widened. There she is, he said. There who is, the real you. Not the nervous version worried about making a good impression. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I like the real you, Clara, the one who laughs at bad jokes and doesn't pretend to be impressed by expensive things. I'm a little impressed, she admitted. This is the nicest restaurant I've ever been to. Then I'm glad I could give you the experience, but just so you know, I'd be equally happy getting pizza and sitting in my car. Really, really. It's the company that matters, not the setting. They ordered, and the food was predictably incredible. But more than that, the conversation flowed easily, picking up where they'd left off in all those late-night office sessions. Xavier told her about his childhood, about being the oldest of 3 kids, and feeling responsible for everyone. Clara shared stories about her siblings, about the chaos of growing up in a loud, loving family. What was your brother like? Clara asked gently. Tyler. Xavier's expression softened. He was brilliant, funny, kind, way too smart for his own good. He wanted to be a doctor, specifically a pediatric oncologist. He said if he survived cancer, he wanted to help other kids do the same. He sounds incredible. He was. Losing him broke something in our family that never fully healed. Xavier paused. My parents are still together, still love each other, but there's this shadow that never quite goes away. This space at the table that's always empty. Clara squeezed his hand. I'm sorry doesn't feel like enough. It means something coming from you. You understand what it's like to watch someone you love suffer. They talked about loss and resilience and the way grief changed people. It should have been a depressing conversation, but somehow it wasn't. It felt honest and real and intimate in a way Clara hadn't experienced before. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, the conversation shifted lighter. Xavier told her about his disastrous attempt to learn to cook during the pandemic, about setting off his smoke alarm so many times his neighbors threatened to call the fire department. You're a millionaire, Clara said, laughing. Why didn't you just hire a chef? Where's the fun in that? Besides, I wanted to prove I could do something practical with my hands besides type code. How did that work out? I can now make exactly 3 dishes without burning down my kitchen. I consider that a victory. Clara was completely charmed. This version of Xavier, self-deprecating and funny and slightly ridiculous, was even more dangerous than the confident CEO she saw at work. After dinner, Xavier suggested a walk along the lakefront despite the cold. Clara agreed, and they strolled along the path with the city lights reflected in the dark water. Xavier had given her his coat again, and she'd stopped protesting. "Can I ask you something personal?" Xavier said after a while. "That depends on the question." "Why did you really turn me down in the coffee shop? It was more than just pride, wasn't it?" Clara thought about how to answer. "My whole life, I've watched people assume I need rescuing. When my dad left, when money got tight, when my mom got sick, everyone wants to swoop in and fix things." She pulled the coat tighter. "But accepting help feels like admitting I can't handle my own life, like I'm failing somehow. That's not failure, that's being human. Maybe, but it's hard to see it that way when you've spent your whole life trying to prove you're strong enough." Xavier stopped walking, turning to face her. "You are strong enough. Turning down help doesn't make you stronger. Knowing when to accept it is its own kind of strength. Is that why you respected me for saying no? Because most people don't." "I respected you because you knew your own mind and weren't afraid to assert your boundaries, even with a stranger who had something you needed." His voice dropped. "That kind of self-possession is rare. It's also incredibly attractive." The air between them crackled with tension. Clara could feel the heat of Xavier's body despite the cold, could see the way his eyes darkened as he looked at her. "Xavier," she whispered. "Tell me if this isn't okay," he said, and then he was kissing her. The world narrowed to the warmth of his mouth, the gentle pressure of his hands framing her face. Xavier kissed her like she was precious, like he'd been thinking about this for weeks and wanted to save her every second. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and his arms came around her waist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "Me too." "Really?" Clara laughed softly. "You couldn't tell." "I hoped, but you're good at hiding what you're feeling. Self-preservation." "I know." Xavier pulled back enough to look at her properly. "I meant what I said before. Your job is secure no matter what happens with us. I'll have HR draw up a document if you need it in writing." "Do people usually require documentation before dating you?" "I've never dated an employee before. This is new territory for both of us." Clara sobered at that. "How is this going to work? At the office, I mean." "However you want it to work. We can keep things private if you prefer. Or we can be open about it. I'll follow your lead." "I don't want special treatment. You won't get any, except maybe more of this." Xavier kissed her again, soft and sweet. "If you're amenable, I might be amenable to that." They walked back to the car hand in hand, and Xavier instructed the driver to take them to Clara's house. In the back seat, he kept her hand in his, occasionally lifting it to press a kiss to her knuckles. "When can I see you again?" he asked. "You'll see me Monday at work." "You know what I mean. Another date, just us." Clara pretended to think about it. "I might be free next weekend." "Might be. I'll have to check my very busy social calendar." Xavier tugged her closer until she was pressed against his side. "Your trouble, you like it." "I really do." When they pulled up to her house, Xavier walked her to the door despite Clara's protests about the cold. On the porch, he kissed her one more time, slow and thorough, until Clara's knees went weak. "Good night, Clara," he said against her lips. "Good night." She floated into the house to find her mother and sister waiting in the living room, both trying and failing to look casual. "So," Megan demanded, "how was it?" Clara touched her lips, still tingling from Xavier's kisses. "It was perfect." The next few months were a delicate balancing act. At work, Clara and Xavier maintained professional boundaries, though Clara caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her blush. They saved their relationship for after hours, stolen dinners and weekend dates and long phone calls late at night. Clara met Xavier's parents on a Sunday afternoon in March. Thomas and Susan York welcomed her with open arms, though Clara could see the initial assessment in Susan's eyes. She was used to that look, the slight surprise that someone like her was dating someone like Xavier. But over lunch, as Clara and Susan discussed the foundation's work and Clara's background in social services, she felt the older woman's approval growing. "You care about the mission," Susan said as they cleared the table while the men talked in the living room. "That matters to Xavier more than anything." "It matters to me too," Clara said honestly. "This work is important." His last girlfriend thought the foundation was a hobby, something Xavier did to make himself feel good about being rich. Susan handed Clara a dish to dry. She lasted 6 months before Xavier realized they wanted completely different lives. Clara absorbed this information. He mentioned it didn't end well. That's an understatement. She tried to convince him to sell his stake in the foundation and invest in some luxury resort scheme. Susan shook her head. She didn't understand that the foundation isn't just what Xavier does, it's who he is. "I understand that. I can tell," Susan smiled. "Which is why I like you. You see my son, not just his bank account." The praise warmed Clara from the inside out. She'd been nervous about meeting Xavier's parents, worried they'd think she wasn't good enough. Instead, they treated her like family. In April, Clara finally introduced Xavier to her siblings properly. Megan had already met him, but her brothers, Jake and Michael, were more protective. The dinner at her parents' house started awkwardly, with Jake asking pointed questions about Xavier's intentions, and Michael making jokes about millionaires slumming it in their middle-class neighborhood. Xavier handled it with grace and humor, answering questions honestly and not rising to the bait when Michael got particularly snarky. By the end of the night, he'd won them over by helping with dishes and complimenting their mother's cooking. "He's all right," Jake admitted to Clara as they stood in the kitchen. "Better than that loser you dated in college." Paul wasn't a loser. Paul was absolutely a loser. This guy actually appreciates you. Clara glanced through the doorway to where Xavier was showing her dad something on his phone, both men laughing. "He does, doesn't he? Don't screw it up, sis." "I'm trying not to." But as the relationship deepened, Clara found herself wrestling with insecurities she thought she'd left behind. Xavier's world was so different from hers, full of charity galas and business dinners and people who casually discussed their vacation homes. She tried to fit in, bought nicer clothes with her salary, learned which fork to use at fancy restaurants. It came to a head at a foundation fundraiser in May. Clara wore a borrowed designer gown, her hair professionally styled, and felt like an imposter the entire evening. She watched Xavier work the room with easy confidence, charming donors and making people laugh, and felt the distance between their worlds more acutely than ever. A woman in diamonds approached Xavier, touching his arm with familiar ease. Clara recognized her from photos in society magazines, some heiress named Vanessa something. They spoke for several minutes, Vanessa laughing and leaning close, and jealousy twisted in Clara's gut. "That's his ex-girlfriend," a voice said beside her. Clara turned to find Monica watching the interaction with knowing eyes. Before the one who wanted him to sell the foundation, they dated for about a year. "They look comfortable together," Clara said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "They move in the same circles. Same background, same tax bracket." Monica gave her a sympathetic look. "That can matter in relationships like this." Clara excused herself and headed to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. She stood in front of the mirror, taking in her elaborate dress and makeup, and felt like a child playing dress-up. She was still there 10 minutes later when Xavier found her. "Clara." He pushed open the bathroom door, concern written across his face. "Are you okay? You disappeared." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Talk to me." Clara gestured at herself, at the dress and the shoes and the whole elaborate costume. "Look at me. This isn't who I am. I don't belong in this world." "What are you talking about? Your ex-girlfriend is out there, the one in the diamonds. She's perfect for you." "Same background, same social circle, same everything." Xavier's expression darkened. "Vanessa is my past, you're my present, and hopefully my future. But she fits here. I'm just pretending." "Hey." Xavier stepped closer, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You're not pretending anything. You're the most genuine person in that entire ballroom. That's why I fell in love with you." Clara's breath caught. "What?" "I love you," Xavier said, his voice steady and sure. "I love that you called me out on my privilege. I love that you turned down my help when you needed it because you're too stubborn for your own good. I love how much you care about the work, about making a real difference." His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I love you, Clara. Not some version of you in an expensive dress, just you." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "That's what scares me. I don't want to lose myself trying to fit into your life." "Then don't. I fell in love with who you are, not who you think you should be. If you never want to come to another one of these galas, that's fine with me. I'd rather order pizza and watch movies with you anyway." "Really? Really?" Xavier kissed her softly. "This stuff, the fundraisers and the social climbing and all of it, that's work. You're home." Clara threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. "I'm sorry, I'm being ridiculous. You're being human. And for the record, you're the most beautiful woman at this event. That dress is just a bonus." They returned to the gala hand in hand, and Clara found she didn't care any more about the stares or the whispers. Xavier loved her. That was enough. Summer brought new challenges. Monica announced she was leaving to take a director position at another nonprofit, and Xavier offered Clara the role. She almost turned it down, worried about nepotism accusations, but Xavier convinced her she'd earned it on merit. "Your work speaks for itself," he said when she expressed doubts. "You've brought in more grant funding in 6 months than anyone else in the department's history. You've designed programs that other foundations are copying. You deserve this promotion. People will say I only got it because we're dating. Let them. You know the truth. I know the truth. That's what matters." Clara accepted the position and threw herself into the work with renewed energy. She hired a replacement for her old role, mentored the new grant coordinators, and spearheaded an initiative to expand the foundation's reach to underserved communities. Xavier watched her thrive with obvious pride. They still worked late together sometimes, but now it was as equals, bouncing ideas off each other and challenging each other's assumptions. Clara had never felt more professionally fulfilled. Their relationship continued to deepen. Xavier had a key to Clara's apartment now, and she had one to his downtown penthouse. They fell into an easy rhythm, spending weeknights at her place because it was closer to the foundation offices and weekends at his when they wanted more space and privacy. Clara's family adored him. Xavier never missed a Sunday dinner at her parents' house, and he developed a genuine friendship with her brothers. He helped Jake fix his car, discussed books with Megan, and spent hours playing chess with her father. "He's good people," her dad said one evening after Xavier had left. "Doesn't matter how much money he has. He treats you right, treats us with respect. That's what matters." In August, Xavier took Clara to Wisconsin to visit his hometown. They drove through small streets while he pointed out his childhood home, the park where he and Tyler used to play, the library where he'd spent hours teaching himself to code. "This is where it all started," he said, pulling into the parking lot of a modest two-story house. "My parents still live here. They refuse to let me buy them something bigger." Thomas and Susan greeted them with hugs and homemade pie. Clara spent the weekend hearing stories about Xavier as a boy, stubborn and brilliant and determined to change the world. "He got that from Tyler," Susan said quietly as they sat on the back porch watching fireflies. After Tyler died, Xavier became obsessed with making his life mean something. Building the company, making money, starting the foundation. It was all about honoring his brother's memory. "He talks about Tyler a lot," Clara said. "In a good way, like keeping him alive through stories." "You're good for him," Susan said. "I can see how happy you make him. He smiles more now, laughs easier. We haven't seen him like this in years." That night, lying in Xavier's childhood bedroom with its outdated posters and old trophies, Clara felt overwhelmed with emotion. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, pulling her closer. "That I'm lucky, that this is real." "It's very real." Xavier kissed her temple. "You're stuck with me now." "Is that a promise or a threat?" "Both." Fall arrived with a snap of cold air and the foundation's biggest fundraising push of the year. Clara coordinated events, wrote proposals, and negotiated with donors until she was running on caffeine and determination. Xavier worked equally hard, and they barely saw each other for weeks, except in passing at the office. The stress peaked in October when a major grant fell through at the last minute, jeopardizing a program Clara had spent months developing. She came home exhausted and defeated, ready to cry from frustration. Xavier was waiting in her apartment with takeout and wine. "I heard about the Morrison grant," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry. 6 months of work gone." Clara's voice was muffled against his chest. "All those families we could have helped. We'll find another funder. The program is solid. Someone else will see its value. What if they don't? Then we'll fund it ourselves. The foundation has discretionary money." Xavier pulled back to look at her. "This isn't over, Clara. It's just a setback." Clara let him feed her and pour her wine and talk her through backup options. By the end of the night, she felt marginally better and completely in love with this man who understood her work, because he cared about it as much as she did. "Thank you," she said as they got ready for bed. "For what? For getting it. For not telling me it's just a job or that I should relax. For caring about the same things I care about." Xavier kissed her slow and sweet. "That's what partners do. We show up for each other." The word partners settled into Clara's chest, warm and right. They were partners in work and in life. She'd never had that before, someone who truly understood both sides of her. In November, they celebrated Clara's 27th birthday with a quiet dinner at home. Xavier cooked one of his 3 dishes, only slightly burning the edges, and presented her with a small wrapped box. "This isn't too much, is it?" he asked nervously. "I know you don't like expensive gifts." Clara opened the box to find a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a compass. Engraved on the back were coordinates. "What are these numbers?" she asked. "The latitude and longitude of the Brennan Center. Where you were working when you decided to dedicate your life to helping others." Xavier's voice was soft. "You told me once that making that choice, committing to social work despite everyone saying you'd never make enough money, was the moment you knew who you were. I wanted you to have something to remember that." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "Xavier, this is beautiful. You're beautiful. Inside and out. I wanted you to have something that reminds you of your strength and your purpose." He fastened the necklace around her neck. "And selfishly, I wanted you to have something from me that you'd wear every day." Clara touched the pendant, feeling the weight of it against her skin. "I love it. I love you. I love you too." They made love that night with a tenderness that made Clara's chest ache. Afterward, wrapped in Xavier's arms, she felt more content than she'd ever been. "I want to tell you something," Xavier said into the darkness. "Okay. I've been thinking about the future, our future." He paused. "I know we've only been together for 10 months. I know that's not very long in the grand scheme of things, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Clara's heart started pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want forever with you. Marriage, kids, growing old together, all of it." Xavier shifted so he could see her face in the dim light from the window. "I'm not proposing right now. I want to do that properly. But I needed you to know that's where my head is, where my heart is." "That's where my heart is too," Clara whispered. "I want all of that with you." Xavier kissed her, deep and thorough, and Clara felt the promise in it. This was forever. They'd found something rare and precious, and they weren't letting go. Winter settled over Chicago with brutal cold and early darkness. Clara and Xavier spent more time at his penthouse, taking advantage of the space and the spectacular views. They hosted Thanksgiving dinner for both their families, a chaotic, wonderful event that required 2 turkeys, and ended with everyone crammed into Xavier's living room playing board games. Clara watched Xavier laughing with her brothers, helping her mother in the kitchen, and felt overwhelmingly grateful. A year ago, she'd been struggling and alone, declining charity from a stranger in a coffee shop. Now she had this, a life full of love and purpose and belonging. December brought the foundation's holiday party and a surprise announcement. Xavier had decided to step back from the day-to-day operations, transitioning to a chairman role while promoting one of the senior directors to CEO. "I want to focus on the mission side of things," he explained to the staff. "Program development, grant strategy, community partnerships. The administrative side has never been my strength." Clara caught his eye across the room and smiled. She knew the real reason. Xavier wanted more flexibility, more time to actually enjoy his life instead of being chained to executive responsibilities. More time with her. On Christmas Eve, Xavier took Clara to a small jewelry store in his hometown. His parents had recommended it, he explained, and he wanted her input on something. "Input on what?" Clara asked as they walked inside. "This." Xavier led her to the engagement ring display. "I know I said I wasn't proposing yet, but I want you to choose what you want." "Within reason," he added with a smile. "I'm not buying you a rock the size of your fist." Clara laughed, overwhelmed and delighted. "You want me to pick my own engagement ring. I want you to have something you love, something that feels like you, not like what I think you should want." Xavier squeezed her hand. "So look around. Take your time." They spent an hour looking at rings while the patient jeweler showed them options. Clara gravitated toward the simpler designs, classic and elegant without being ostentatious. She finally settled on a platinum band with a single round diamond, perfect and understated. "That one," she said, pointing. Xavier tried to look at the price tag, but Clara swatted his hand away. "Don't tell me, I don't want to know. It's not that expensive. I don't care if it costs $1 or $1,000,000. I love it." Xavier arranged for the jeweler to size it, and they left with a promise to return after the holidays. In the car, Clara couldn't stop smiling. "You know proposing is usually a surprise," she said. "I know. But I wanted you to have a choice in this. You're the one who has to wear it for the rest of your life." "The rest of my life," Clara repeated, testing the words. "That sounds pretty good." "Yeah, yeah." They spent Christmas with Xavier's parents, a quiet celebration full of good food and old stories. Clara helped Susan cook while Xavier and his father assembled a complicated piece of furniture for the local community center. It felt domestic and perfect, like a preview of their future. On Christmas night, back at the house with snow falling outside the windows, Xavier pulled Clara into his arms. "I know I said I'd wait to propose properly," he said. "But I can't. I don't want to wait anymore. Xavier." He dropped to one knee right there in his parents' living room, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was the ring Clara had chosen, gleaming in the soft light. "Clara Anderson, you've challenged me and inspired me and made me want to be a better man since the day you told me no in that coffee shop. You see me for who I am, not what I have. You understand what matters and you fight for it every single day. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone." His voice was thick with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Clara was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Xavier slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He stood and kissed her while she heard cheering from the next room, where apparently his parents had been listening. Thomas and Susan rushed in to congratulate them, hugging them both and wiping away happy tears. They called Clara's family on video chat, and the celebration extended across state lines. By the time Clara and Xavier finally made it to bed, it was past midnight and technically the day after Christmas. "Best holiday ever," Clara said, admiring her ring in the darkness. "Agreed." Xavier pulled her close. "I can't wait to marry you. How long of an engagement are we talking?" "However long you want. I'd marry you tomorrow if you'd let me," Clara laughed. "Let's give it a few months at least. I want to plan something nice." "As long as I get to call you my wife at the end of it, you can plan whatever you want." They got married in April in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, surrounded by spring flowers and the people they loved most. Clara wore a simple white dress. Xavier wore a navy suit, and they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. "You taught me that saying no can be an act of self-respect," Xavier said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "You taught me that real strength isn't about having all the answers or never needing help. It's about knowing yourself and standing firm in your values. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you." Clara was crying before she even started her vows. "You respected me when I had nothing to offer you except my pride and my principles. You saw value in me before you saw my credentials or my potential. You love me not despite my stubborn independence, but because of it. You've given me a partnership that honors who I am while helping me become who I want to be." They kissed as husband and wife to thunderous applause, and Clara felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held at the foundation offices, transformed with flowers and lights into something magical. They danced their first dance to a song Xavier had chosen, something about coming home and finding where you belong. Clara rested her head on his shoulder and thought about how far they'd come from that moment in the coffee shop. "No regrets," Xavier murmured in her ear, "not a single one." "Good, because you're stuck with me now, legally binding and everything," Clara laughed. "I can live with that." They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of art and wine and lazy mornings in bed. Xavier showed Clara Venice and Florence, and she fell in love with the architecture and the history. They talked about the future, about starting a family someday, about the programs they wanted to develop at the foundation. "I want to create a scholarship fund," Clara said one evening over dinner in Rome, "for kids who have had to leave school to care for sick family members. Give them a path back to their education." "That's perfect," Xavier said. "Let's do it. We can name it after your mother and my brother." Clara reached across the table to take his hand. "The Linda and Tyler Fund, I love that. They'd both approve, I think, using their experiences to help others." They returned to Chicago tanned and happy, ready to start their married life in earnest. Clara moved into Xavier's penthouse officially, though she kept her apartment for another few months, unable to quite let go of her independence. Xavier understood without her having to explain. Work at the foundation continued to be fulfilling and challenging. Clara launched the scholarship fund and watched it grow beyond her wildest expectations. Xavier focused on expanding their reach, partnering with hospitals and community organizations across the Midwest. They worked together seamlessly, a true team. A year after the wedding, Clara found out she was pregnant. She told Xavier over breakfast on a Sunday morning, showing him the positive test with shaking hands. Xavier stared at it for a long moment, then looked at her with wonder written across his face. "We're having a baby, we're having a baby." He swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe it. Clara, we're going to be parents. Are you ready for this?" "With you, I'm ready for anything." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Clara worked until her 7th month before finally agreeing to take maternity leave. Xavier became ridiculously overprotective, constantly making sure she was comfortable and fed and rested. Clara found it both annoying and endearing. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, 7 pounds and perfect. They named her Emily Grace, after Xavier's prom date who dumped him and Clara's grandmother who taught her to stand up for herself. "Emily Grace York," Xavier said, holding his daughter with tears streaming down his face. "Welcome to the world, sweetheart." Clara watched her husband cradle their baby and felt complete in a way she'd never experienced. This was family. This was home. The first year of parenthood was exhausting and wonderful. Xavier took paternity leave and threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He changed diapers and walked the floor with Emily at 3 in the morning and read parenting books like they were technical manuals. Clara returned to work part-time after 6 months, and they hired a nanny to help during the day. But evenings and weekends were family time, sacred and protected. They took Emily to visit both sets of grandparents regularly, and Clara's siblings fought over who got to babysit. "She's going to be so spoiled," Clara said one Sunday, watching her brothers make faces to get Emily to laugh. "Good," Xavier said. "Every kid should be surrounded by people who love them." When Emily was 18 months old, Clara and Xavier started talking about having another baby. They wanted their children close in age, wanted Emily to have a sibling to grow up with. "I missed that," Xavier said, "after Tyler died. I had my sister, but it wasn't the same. Emily should have a brother or sister." Their son was born 2 years after Emily, during a spring thunderstorm. They named him Thomas Tyler, after Xavier's father and brother. He had Xavier's gray eyes and Clara's stubborn chin, and Xavier was completely smitten from the moment he entered the world. Life settled into a beautiful chaos of children and work and stolen moments of intimacy. Clara couldn't remember what her life had been like before Xavier, before this family they'd built together. The scared, struggling woman who'd refused help in a coffee shop felt like a different person entirely. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised Clara with a weekend away, just the two of them. His parents took the kids, and they escaped to a bed and breakfast in Wisconsin. "I wanted to remind you what it's like to be just us," Xavier said as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Before you were mom and I was dad. I like being mom, I know, but I also like being your husband, and I wanted some time to celebrate that." Xavier pulled her into his lap. 5 years married, 6.5 years since I tried to buy you coffee and you turned me down flat," Clara laughed. "Best decision I ever made. Really, I thought saying yes to dinner was the best decision. Saying no first made saying yes later mean more." Clara kissed him softly. "You respected my boundaries. You saw me as a person, not a problem to solve. That's why I fell in love with you. I fell in love with you the second you looked at me like I was crazy for offering to help, Like you couldn't imagine why a stranger would do something nice without wanting anything in return. I was so embarrassed that day. You were magnificent, proud and stubborn and completely yourself. Xavier tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You still are, even with spit up on your shoulder and circles under your eyes from being up all night with Tommy. You know how to charm a woman. I try. Xavier's expression turned serious. Thank you, Clara, for saying yes to dinner, for taking a chance on me, for building this life with me. Thank you for respecting my no, for seeing it as strength instead of stubbornness, for loving me exactly as I am. They spent the weekend talking and laughing and reconnecting, reminded of why they'd fallen in love in the first place. By the time they picked up their kids on Sunday afternoon, Clara felt renewed and more in love with her husband than ever. Years passed in a blur of school plays and foundation galas and family vacations. Emily grew into a bright, caring child who wanted to be a doctor like her Uncle Tyler had dreamed of being. Tommy was quieter, thoughtful, with his father's head for numbers and his mother's compassion. Clara and Xavier continued to work together at the foundation, watching it grow into one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the country. They hired more staff, expanded to more cities, helped thousands of families navigate medical crises without losing everything. On the 10-year anniversary of the foundation, they held a celebration at the office. Former grant recipients spoke about how the foundation's support had changed their lives. Staff members shared stories of families helped and communities strengthened. Clara stood at the back of the room, watching Xavier give a speech, and felt overwhelmingly proud. This was what they'd built together. Not just a marriage or a family, but a legacy of help and hope. After the event, after the crowds had left and the office was quiet, Clara found Xavier standing in front of the wall of thank you letters they'd received over the years. Hundreds of them, from people whose lives had been touched by their work. You know what the best part is? Xavier said without turning around. What? We did this together. Every single one of these letters represents a collaboration between you and me. Your vision, my resources, our shared commitment to making things better. Clara slipped her hand into his. You tried to buy me coffee, I said no. You respected that, and somehow that turned into all of this. Xavier pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Best investment I never got to make. I was worth the wait though, right, Clara? You were worth everything. They stood there in the quiet office, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built, and Clara thought about the young woman she'd been 7 years ago. Broke and embarrassed, too proud to accept help from a stranger. If she could go back and tell that version of herself what was coming, she wasn't sure she'd believe it, but it was all real. The love, the family, the purpose, the partnership. She'd said no to a cup of coffee and yes to a life beyond her wildest dreams. And it started because one man had respected her boundaries and seen her strength where others saw stubbornness. Xavier had loved her not despite her independence but because of it. He'd given her space to be herself while offering his support whenever she needed it. That was the real gift. Not his money or his status or the comfortable life he could provide. It was his respect, his understanding, his unwavering belief in her capability and worth. Clara looked up at her husband, this good man who changed her life by simply seeing her. I love you, Xavier York. I love you too, Clara York, forever and always. And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of their shared purpose and dreams, Clara knew that no matter what challenges came their way, they'd face them together. Equal partners, best friends, the loves of each other's lives. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was better. It was real.